Hello and welcome back to this week's Something New, where we talk about new things that we've introduced to each other. As usual, this is Paul.
Hello, I'm Paul.
Hello, and I'm James. So this week I've been introducing Paul to Game of Thrones. Paul has never, believe it or not, watched Game of Thrones. First things first then, Paul, what did you make of it?
Well, you can't really, first and foremost, you can't really escape it, can you? I'd never seen it, but I knew a little bit about it. It's probably the biggest television show in the world.
So just for clarity then, what did you know about Game of Thrones?
So going in, a lot of death, and I knew a lot of people apparently die in it. Dragons. Yeah. Heard a lot about the dragons, breathing fire and all that. And incest as well.
Incest, lots and lots of sex.
Apparently, a big thing. Even in the first episode, there was a lot of characters, so I found it a bit hard to make out. But it looked like there was a bit of incest going on at the end of the first episode. I think the Queen was caught doing the dirty with her brother.
Yeah.
So what did I think of it? It was good.
Yeah.
I said there was a lot of characters, a bit difficult to keep up with. I'd heard the one or two going in. So Sean Bean's character, Ned.
Yeah.
Yeah. Liked him. Seems to be the main character.
So, but I mean, just to get everything on the table, you did know before you got into Game of Thrones what happens with Ned.
Yeah. That was one of the ones I knew about. Yeah, it's Sean Bean and he dies in everything as well. So I'd heard of him. The only other one I think I knew the name of going in was Jon Snow.
Yeah.
I know he's a big character, and I knew I can't remember his name. I didn't know his name, but I knew Peter Dinklage. Everyone loves Peter Dinklage's character. I can see why.
So the way it worked when I introduced you to Game of Thrones. Just for the purpose of this podcast, we like to introduce new things to each other, and I've been trying to get Paul to watch Game of Thrones for a long time now. He's not really into that genre, but I was trying to say it's more like The Sopranos crossed with Lord of the Rings rather than just your average fantasy show. So how did you find that? Did you find there were elements of politics?
Definitely. I mean, it's early days. I think the first scene, they're in the place that's dead snowy and cold, a bit like the Arctic, and there's the wall. So
the north is essentially Manchester, Liverpool. The south is essentially Warwickshire all the way down to London and the home counties.
Exactly, and that opening scene, that was a bit fantastical. There was the big old ice monsters, it looked like, which I've heard a bit about them as well, as you might expect.
Yeah.
We're coming up on, is it the last season this year?
Yeah, the last season.
So there's things I know even though I haven't watched it. And I know these ice monsters are going to be a big deal. So, bit sketchy at first, but after that it was a bit more about, as you say, it was a bit more political, wasn't it? A bit more about the characters. A lot of people, vying for power, things like that. You've got the king who doesn't seem much like a king at all. Bit overweight. Characters that are a
bit of a Henry VIII.
Yeah, exactly. Characters that are a bit more, subversive.
Yeah.
I like that aspect of it.
Do you think you'll continue to watch it then?
I'll try. Yeah, I'm intrigued enough. I'd say I was a bit on the fence, but then that last scene with the Queen and her brother, and the little lad who catches Bran who catches them and they push him out the window. I don't really know much about him, so I don't know if he's dead or what. Interested to see what happens there.
Yeah.
Interested to see what happens with a few things. So I think I'll give a few more episodes a go at least.
Yeah, brilliant. Can you make any predictions of what you think's going to happen?
I mean, it's early going, and I've been spoiled on a few things. I predict that Sean Bean will die.
Oh, yeah.
But that's not a prediction in good faith because I already knew that.
Yeah.
So I feel like.
Do you feel like the first episode has like exposed the main characters? Do you feel like the main characters are starting to?
Yeah. So if I didn't know that Sean Bean's character was going to die, and I think he dies relatively early. I don't know how early, but I think he dies relatively early.
Yeah.
If I didn't know, I'd assume he was the main character for like the duration of the entire show or whatever that might be. I know that everyone loves Peter Dinklage's character, the imp they call him in the show, I think, but I can't remember his actual name. So I assume he's going to have a big part to play. We haven't talked about the blonde-haired girl who's sort of like in a different country.
Okay.
I know people like her. She's the one who's going to get the dragons, isn't she?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I assume she's going to be a big character because people are still talking about her. So I think her, the imp, and Jon Snow, I assume they'll be big characters.
Yeah.
I don't really know about anyone else at this stage, but I know it's a show with a lot of characters apparently.
Yeah. Well,
So,
you're not that far. You're not that far off, to be honest.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, brilliant. Well, it looks like Paul's learnt a lot about Game of Thrones, and it seems like you know a lot about the show, having not watched that much of it.
Like I say, it's a huge show, isn't it? So, how about shall we go on to what I introduced you to?
Yeah,
on
absolutely.
this occasion.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll usually do a bit of a variation. So it might be a movie, might be a television show. Sometimes it'll be music. So in this instance, I introduced you to one of my favourite albums, something you'd never heard in full, at least.
No, I'd certainly heard the popular ones like Go Your Own Way and stuff like that. You can't not hear them songs when you're out and about in town. You listen to them songs.
Exactly. So we're talking, of course, about a classic Fleetwood Mac album. I'm holding it up, of course, for those who can or cannot see.
Yeah.
1970s classic, Rumours, by one of my favourite bands, Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah.
So you say you'd heard Go Your Own Way.
I did Go Your Own Way. One of my favourites actually was The Chain, which I immediately recognised as the opening to Formula One when I was growing up.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I assumed that you, even if you hadn't heard it anyway, I mean, I think it gets used in movies and stuff, doesn't it?
It's very visceral, that sound.
Yeah, exactly. I love. It's probably my favourite song on the album. I think it's a great song in its own right. But then right near the end, you get that bass.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
That bass line, excellent stuff. So you enjoyed that?
Enjoyed a lot of songs. There were a few songs that I was kind of. I mean, for a great album, I thought there were a few songs that weren't amazing. Oh Daddy being one of them. Didn't get it.
No.
Didn't get that song.
That's a bit of a different meaning these days compared to what it had in the 70s.
Yeah.
I'd say.
and Gold Dust Woman. I weren't a massive fan of them, but for the majority, it was a really good album. Good, consistent sound, and it
well,
was really good.
I mean, it's an album. I mean, again, I'm speaking as someone. It is one of my favourite albums. It's got a good 10, 11 songs on there, and I'd say a good 5 or 6 of them are real classics.
Yeah.
So I'm certainly glad that you enjoyed it. Any particular song that you hadn't heard before that you'll go away and you think you'll be listening to that in the future? You know, it's one of those songs you'll listen to for the rest of your life.
It was one of those albums. Although I hadn't really listened to it before, it was one of those albums that, after the first or second time listening to the songs, it triggered a memory of hearing that song before.
Yeah.
So although I wasn't overly familiar with the album, I kind of knew the songs. But yeah, I thought it was really good. One of the things in particular that I was thinking was how there are different tracks for different voices. So, for example, I didn't know there were that many members of the band, which I found surprising. I had a bit of. I looked them up because I was really enjoying the track.
Did you find anything of interest about like the background of this album in particular? Because it's got a bit of an interesting story.
Yeah, well, I know roughly that there was a lot of sex going on in the band, a bit of cheating, a bit of monogamy. What was going on? So,
pretty much all of them, to some extent, hated each other at this time, or so the stories go. Yeah. Stevie Nicks, Lindsey Buckingham, pretty much all of them, were arguing with each other at some point, which I believe is sort of where the name of the album comes from. Okay. Rumours. It's referring to all the rumours that were going on about the band at the time, about the bad feelings between them.
Okay.
Really interesting. What's interesting is, for something, and again, I'm just speaking on my own opinion here, for something so excellent to come out of a lot of bad feeling, really. When you think about it, it's interesting.
It kind of makes sense at the same time when you think of Lennon and McCartney. You know, of constantly vying for, you know, for the spot as the better songwriter. So maybe there was a bit of that.
Bit of competition, do you think?
Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah, and it's one of those where you'll find that on this album, obviously they're a band, so it's all collaborative. But you'll find that on a lot of different songs, all great in their own way, were led by a different member of the band.
Oh,
you know, so there's a lot of creative differences, but just a lot of creativity. My question is, we don't really buy actual CDs or records anymore.
Yeah.
Would you go out and buy this?
I would probably not go out and buy it in a hard disc version, but I'd definitely listen to it on Spotify or YouTube.
Mm-hmm. So go on your iPod.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I think that's we've covered everything really. We've covered yours and mine. So for next week, I'm going to get you to watch Saving Private Ryan, a film that I cannot believe you haven't seen.
Well, I'm not a huge Tom Hanks fan.
Yeah.
I've seen a few of his movies. It's usually a bit saccharine for me, but he's a good actor, and you know I like war films, so I'll certainly give that a go. I am going to ask you to read a book.
Okay.
If you can manage that.
Okay, I'll give it a go. So what's the book?
I'm going to ask you to read my favourite book, which is Trainspotting.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is that Irvin Welsh?
It is, yeah. Good luck with the dialect, because he writes it in full-on Scottish, but I think you'll enjoy it. So we'll come back next week and talk about those, yeah?
Brilliant, yeah, sounds good. Okay, so join us next week for something new, where we will be covering Saving Private Ryan and Trainspotting, if I can read it in time. Okay.
Excellent, see you then.
Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you.